Only 16% of Americans now read for pleasure on any given day, down from about 28% 20 years ago. Why does this matter, and what are we losing when we stop reading? Hey, this is Blighted Pine Books, and today we're going to be taking a look at a recent study by the University College London and the University of Florida about the decline in reading for pleasure over the past 20 years in America. So, books have been having a hard time in the 21st century. For hundreds of years, literacy has served as a clear and obvious purpose. Reading liberates the mind, it educates the person, and it makes us more likely to succeed. And ultimately, I think it makes us better people. But with the ubiquity of smartphones, a political culture that promotes banning literature, and a general malaise around the idea of books, the culture of reading is on life support in the West. So the University of College London and the University of Florida have recently completed a study on readership in the West, and the outlook is predictably grim. So I think today I'd just like to kind of walk through the article itself and highlight some of the most important observations and claims that are made. So the study begins with a summary, which lists the various benefits of reading, including literacy, employment, and health, as well as promoting cultural understanding, but also notes that previous studies on readership have been flawed. So the researchers have found in a 20-year period, each year, a 3% decrease in reading for pleasure, with racial demographics, educational entertainment, and income levels being strongly correlated with decreased readership. And so in the introduction, the study continues by more narrowly listing some of the myriad benefits of reading, right? And these include some intellectual benefits like direct gains in comprehension skill, vocabulary, logical reasoning, and imagination. Next, some emotional benefits such as emotional intelligence and empathy. Some professional benefits, links with academic achievement, financially rewarding employment, career growth, and involvement in civic life. And finally, health-related improvements such as generally promoting health, reducing stress, anxiety, depressive symptoms, supporting better sleep, slowing cognitive decline in older adults, also increasing longevity. It's interesting to note just how broad the benefits of reading are. I remember it was about a year ago, I was at a picnic with some of my fiance's colleagues, and their son was having just a difficult time like appreciating reading and getting into the habit of reading. And so my colleague's friend's husband asked me, he was like, well, what are your thoughts? Why do you think that people should read? And this study, interestingly, it notes that nearly every aspect of modern life that we find emotionally and psychologically draining find their remedy in reading, from poverty to academic achievement to stronger emotional connections and reduced stress, and ultimately promoting physical and neurological health. Reading seems to be like almost a panacea for so many of the things that are ailing us in the modern world. Next, in the research paper, it lists some of the results. The researchers outline how their study was performed. They say that they asked participants to recall their activities over a 24-hour period, beginning at 4 a.m. on the prior day and then ending at 4 a.m. on the day of the interview. Reading could include magazines, audiobooks, or Kindle. Also, they separately surveyed individuals on time spent reading with children. The important direct result was that a staggering low percent of individuals were reading for pleasure. Only 16% of participants in the study regularly read for pleasure. I found it personally interesting that of those who did read, about 94% did so at home. None of this data it's really surprising, but the low of 16% is pretty alarming, given these rates are most likely going to be decreasing in the near and long-term future. However, I did find the 94% reading at home to be pretty surprising. I love reading in public, coffee shops, whatever, and I often see other people doing the same. Next, the study goes on to discuss the role of individual characteristics. So they identified characteristics that correlated with the readership or lack thereof, females versus males, older participants, those with higher education and the highest levels of family income were more likely to read. It's also worth noting that the income level predicted higher rates of reading, but that all income groups experienced a decline. So some of my thoughts on that, like one of my former colleagues, he used to say that reading is the ultimate form of delayed gratification. And sometimes I was wondering, I was like, what does he mean by that? And so while it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, the fact that those with higher education and higher family income make a habit of reading should be a wake up call to anyone who's on the road to self-improvement. The next section of the research is the discussion. The New York Times, they recently published an article that went kind of viral. I heard about the article from a lot of friends and family members, and they cited this passage as the primary concern. In a large nationally representative sample of the US population, the proportion who read for pleasure on an average day declined over the last 20 years, from highs of 28 in 2004 to lows of 16% in 2023, a relative decrease of 3% per year. In other words, reading is down by about 40% over the course of the past 2 decades. Additionally, these researchers, they point out that rates of reading have really been declining for a long time, since the 1940s, they note. They write that this decline is concerning given earlier evidence for downward trends in reading for pleasure from the 1940s through to the start of our study in 2003, suggesting at least 80 years of continued decline in reading for pleasure. I was kind of curious about this, and I did some research and found that by 1940, at least 90% of Americans had a radio. My own mother, I remember, she rarely speaks of like sitting around and like reading with her mother and her brothers, but she often recalls listening to radio shows with rapt pleasure. So the problem is that reading is hard. It takes concentration, creativity, and an aptitude for boredom. When an alternative appears, be it a radio, television, iPad, smartphone screen, whatever, we're hardwired to choose it. But we also need to install personal software that limits these impulses. Next, the researchers point out ultimately and kind of obviously that leisure time is finite, and that most Americans are likely just replacing their reading time with other forms of media. And they even note that in Spain, they found that TV watching is negatively associated with book reading, indicated that it may be replacing time spent on reading. That seems pretty obvious to me. The researchers importantly note that it's unclear whether all types of reading provide equal benefits. I thought this was an important distinction. They point out that like reading news will often increase rather than decrease stress, which is, something you can really notice when watching, family members doom scrolling politics. And then also reading nonfiction may involve fewer opportunities for developing linguistic skills, creativity, imagination, theory of mind, and or emotion regulation than reading fiction. This is something that I've just been kind of pondering recently. Like, are the benefits of reading fiction fundamentally different than the benefits of reading nonfiction, or like to what degree do they overlap? They don't go into any of that in this study, but I'm curious about it. And if I see anything online about it, I'll share it with you all. So they wrap up with their conclusions in the study. And so the researchers conclude by restating what's pretty obvious to most, that readership over the past 20 years is way down. And they express a general worry about the future of readership, given its myriad benefits. Our findings, they state, thus demonstrate the urgent need for more targeted strategies to increase opportunities for reading for the whole population, particularly among high-risk groups. So some of my thoughts. None of this data, it's really very surprising, yet it's somehow still alarming. As a teacher, I know so many students who tell me they can't focus in class, they haven't gotten enough sleep, they're anxious, or they're depressed, they're having trouble with social connections, they're also highly motivated and they want to succeed in life, yet somehow nobody has shared with them the good news. The remedy seems to be reading. And as the research notes, not all reading is equal. In fact, some reading actually leads to increased anxiety. So where do we go from here? Maybe it's a romantic thought, but if we just start signaling to one another that books are cool, it could have sweeping societal impacts. There's already some pushback against the algorithms, with some teens buying up old iPods with the dangling white cables. And we know, for example, that like cigarettes are carcinogens. And so we dramatically reduce the rates of smoking. So maybe if we can simply message about the benefits of books, our culture can start reading again. And who knows where that might lead. Reading isn't just a pastime, it's survival. All right, so this has been Blighted Pine Books. I'm just sharing some research with y'all about readership in the United States. If you found this helpful, please please subscribe down below. Please share this with other people if you're worried about them not reading. Share with them the good news. Open up a book, improve your life. All right, thanks. Cheers.